Brilliance Audio presents Supreme Disorder, Judicial Nominations and the Politics of America's Highest Court by Ilya Shapiro. Performed by Fred Stella. When they set out to design the Supreme Court, the framers debated various ways to appoint the members of the judicial branch. We know from James Madison's notes of the Constitutional Convention that by July 1787, the delegates seemed to have settled on having the Senate appoint federal judges. It looked like the judiciary, or at least the High Court, was one more part of the young republic that would have state interests paramount, as filtered through the upper house of Congress. As the delegates moved on to other aspects of their deliberations, discussion of the judiciary focused on the scope of its powers and the sorts of cases federal judges would consider. It was understood, without being written into the Constitution, that the justices would ride circuit, traveling to designated parts of the country to preside over cases when the High Court wasn't sitting. The Judiciary Act of 1789, which established that the Supreme Court would have 6 members and created the lower federal courts, designated 1 local U.S. District Court judge and 2 Supreme Court justices to preside over cases, which required such arduous travel that Congress soon reduced the number of justices required to hold circuit court from 2 to 1. Still, the mechanism for choosing justices confounded the delegates until the convention's final days in September, when a draft emerged that balanced the views of those like Benjamin Franklin and John Rutledge, who called for a legislative role to prevent monarchical tendencies in the executive, and those like James Wilson, Alexander Hamilton, and Gouverneur Morris, who favored strongly independent executive prerogatives. The final text reflected a Madisonian compromise that the president shall nominate and, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall appoint judges of the Supreme Court. This last-minute change seems to have been lost in the debate over the legislative and executive branch. At least 2 delegates continued to write and speak about the Senate's naming federal judges. But what did this advice and consent mean? In Federalist 76, Hamilton wrote that the provision requires cooperation between the President and the Senate, a body some delegates generally viewed as an informal advisory council to the President, somewhat akin to the modern cabinet. Hamilton explained that senatorial advice and consent would be an excellent check upon the spirit of favoritism in the President. It would be an efficacious source of stability. Historians and political scientists have continued to debate the meaning of the advice and consent clause, but all we know for sure is its simple text. It is the President's duty to nominate judicial candidates, and the Senate's to decide whether to consent to such nominations, after giving whatever advice senators wish to give, and if not, to reject, table, or otherwise take no action, according to Senate rules. To date, presidents have officially submitted 163 Supreme Court nominations to the Senate, which has confirmed 126 of them, 7 of whom declined to serve. The others were rejected, 12, withdrawn, 12, postponed, 3, or had no action taken, 10. For obvious reasons, George Washington had the most opportunities to make Supreme Court appointments. All told, the first president made 14 nominations, 12 of which were confirmed, 1 rejected, and 1 withdrawn and resubmitted to satisfy the constitutional rule that a sitting member of Congress can't be appointed to an office created during his tenure. Notably, 2 of the confirmed picks declined to serve. Washington had 7 criteria in choosing his justices, to which he adhered rigorously. 1. Support for the new Constitution. 2. Service in the Revolution. 3. Participation in state or national political life. 4. Prior judicial experience.